The room fell silent as Nolan Hayes leaned in and planted a firm kiss on his husband's lips right in the middle of the investor pitch. No one had seen it coming, least of all Richard Voss, the venture capitalist whose $10 million commitment was about to evaporate before the applause could even start. Nolan pulled back, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest, and turned to the audience of suited men and women gathered in the sleek San Francisco conference room. The overhead lights cast long shadows across the polished oak table, and the air felt suddenly thick with unspoken questions. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time today," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor he felt in his knees. "My pitch for Innovate AI was about innovation, but I realize now that true innovation starts with authenticity. This is my husband, Theodore Lang. We've been married for 2 years, and I won't hide that anymore." Theo stood beside him, tall and composed in his button-down shirt, his hands squeezing Nolan's for support. His sandy hair caught the light, and his calm blue eyes scanned the room with quiet strength. The crowd murmured, some faces blank with surprise, others twisted in discomfort or outright disapproval. Nolan's co-founder Alex shifted uncomfortably in his seat at the front row, eyes wide with a mix of pride and fear. Alex had been the only one in the company who knew the full truth for months, and even he had warned Nolan that this moment could backfire spectacularly. As the presentation ended, Voss stood up slowly, his face turning a deep shade of red under his silver hair. "This is highly unprofessional, Hayes," he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "We came here for a business proposal, not a personal statement. I'm sorry, but under these circumstances, my firm cannot move forward with the investment." He gathered his papers with deliberate movements and walked out, the door slamming behind him like a final verdict that echoed off the glass walls. Nolan felt the world tilt beneath his feet. The funding they had counted on to keep the company afloat for the next year was gone in a heartbeat. Back at the office, 20 employees were waiting for good news, dreaming of bonuses and stability after months of long nights, coding AI algorithms that could change healthcare diagnostics. Now he had to tell them the truth, and the weight of that responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders. He had spent years building Innovate AI from a garage idea into a promising startup valued at $15 million on paper, all while keeping his personal life locked away like a secret file. Theo had been patient through late nights and canceled vacations, but the secrecy had started to wear on both of them like sandpaper on skin. Later that evening, in their cozy apartment overlooking the sparkling lights of the bay, Theo poured 2 glasses of red wine and handed one to Nolan. The living room was filled with the soft glow of a single lamp, casting warm shadows on the framed photos of their quiet wedding in a small vineyard upstate. "You did it, Nolan," Theo said softly, his voice full of genuine pride. "I'm proud of you, but I saw the look on your face when Voss left. Are you okay?" Nolan sank into the worn leather couch, running his hands through his dark hair and letting out a long breath. "I don't know, Theo. I thought it would feel liberating, like I was finally stepping into the light after years in the shadows. But now the company. What if I just ruined everything we've built together?" Theo sat beside him, close enough that their knees touched, and placed a reassuring hand on Nolan's arm. "We built it together, remember? You always said the secrecy was killing you inside, eating away at your confidence during every meeting. This is the step you needed. Whatever comes next, we'll face it as partners, the way we promised each other on our wedding day." But as they talked late into the night, the conversation drifting from practical plans to deeper fears, Nolan's mind raced with doubts that refused to quiet. His parents back in a small Texas town had no idea about Theo. He had told them he was too busy for relationships, painting a picture of a dedicated bachelor focused only on success. The thought of that phone call tomorrow made his stomach twist, and the board at Innovate AI had always praised his focused image, the clean-cut professional who never brought personal drama into the office. Now everything was at risk, and the internal conflict churned like a storm. Was this the right time, or had he let emotion override strategy? Theo had begged him for years to stop hiding, to live openly as the gay man he was, but the timing felt like dropping a match into a room full of gasoline. The next morning, the news had spread like wildfire through tech circles in San Francisco and beyond. Social media buzzed with mixed reactions. Some posts praising Nolan for his bravery in the gay story of coming out in corporate America. Others questioning if it was a desperate publicity stunt or a sign of poor judgment. Nolan's phone buzzed nonstop with calls from journalists and former investors, each ring adding to the pressure building in his chest. At the office, the atmosphere was tense, conversations halting whenever he walked by the open-plan desks lined with monitors and half-empty coffee cups. Alex pulled him aside in the break room, the smell of fresh brew mixing with the anxiety in the air. "Man, that was bold," Alex said, keeping his voice low. "But Voss was our biggest shot. The team's worried about payroll in 2 months. What's the plan?" Nolan forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes and clapped Alex on the shoulder. "We pivot. Find new backers who see the value in an authentic leader. I won't apologize for who I am." But inside, the conflict raged stronger than ever. Was this the growth he had longed for, or the beginning of a collapse that would hurt everyone he cared about? As the day wore on, Nolan received a text from his father that made his blood run cold. "Call me." Now, the message was short, but the tone was unmistakable. The family he had kept at arm's length for so long was about to collide with his new reality, and the emotional journey ahead felt both terrifying and inevitable. By afternoon, Nolan stood alone in his glass-walled office, staring out at the city skyline where the Golden Gate Bridge peeked through the haze, wondering if his growth as a man who loved another man would cost him the dream he had sacrificed so much for. The journey had just begun, and the emotional weight pressed heavily on his shoulders like an invisible hand guiding him toward truths he could no longer avoid. He picked up the phone to call his father, knowing that one conversation could change everything, yet feeling a small spark of resolve ignite within him for the first time in years. The phone call with his father lasted less than 5 minutes, but it felt like an eternity of unspoken judgments hanging in the air between Texas and California. "Son, what the hell is this I saw online?" his dad had barked, the familiar drawl laced with disappointment that cut deeper than any investor's rejection. Nolan tried to explain, his voice cracking slightly as he described the years of hiding and the relief of finally being honest, but his father cut him off. "We raised you right, Nolan. This isn't the life we pictured for you. Don't expect us at any family gatherings if that man's there." The line went dead, leaving Nolan staring at the screen, his chest tight with a mix of anger and grief. He had always known his family's conservative views would clash with his truth, but hearing it out loud made the internal crisis feel raw and immediate. Theo was waiting in the kitchen when Nolan emerged, chopping vegetables for dinner with quiet focus. But one look at Nolan's face told him everything. "They didn't take it well," Theo said gently, setting the knife down and pulling Nolan into a hug that smelled of fresh basil and home. "I'm sorry, but you knew this might happen. Your growth isn't about their approval anymore." That night, sleep evaded Nolan as he lay beside Theo, the city's distant hum filtering through the open window. Memories flooded back of their first meeting at a charity event 3 years earlier, when Theo, then a dedicated high school history teacher, had challenged Nolan's guarded demeanor during a panel on innovation and education. Theo's passion for shaping young minds had drawn Nolan in like a magnet, and soon their late-night talks turned into something deeper, something real that demanded honesty. Yet Nolan had insisted on secrecy to protect the startup, promising Theo it was temporary. Now that promise felt like a betrayal, and the misunderstanding between them simmered beneath the surface. The next day at the office, the fallout from Voss's decision hit harder than expected. Board members called an emergency meeting, their faces stern across the video screen. "Nolan, we admire your courage," one said carefully, "but investors are pulling out left and right. We need to reassure the team and find a way to stabilize." Alex backed him up publicly, but in private he admitted the pressure was mounting, with 2 key engineers already updating their resumes. Nolan spent the afternoon reviewing financials, the spreadsheets blurring as he calculated how long they could last without new capital. The unexpected decision from Voss wasn't just a no. It had triggered a domino effect, whispers spreading that Innovate AI was now risky in the eyes of traditional backers. By evening, Nolan met Theo at their favorite park near the apartment, the sun dipping low and painting the grass in golden hues. They walked hand in hand for the first time in public, without glancing over their shoulders, but the joy was tempered by worry. "I feel like I'm letting everyone down," Nolan confessed, kicking a pebble along the path. "The company, even the team who believed in me." Theo stopped and turned to face him, his expression a blend of love and frustration. "This isn't just about the company, Nolan. It's about us. I supported the secrecy because I love you, but it hurt every time we skip family events or you introduce me as a friend at parties. Now that you've taken this step, we have to face the consequences together, not let it drive a wedge between us." Their conversation stretched into the twilight, touching on old arguments and new fears, revealing layers of misunderstanding that had built up over the years. Nolan realized how his choices had forced Theo into the shadows too, sacrificing his own need for openness in their gay relationship. As they headed home, a new resolve formed in Nolan's mind. He would fight for both the company and their marriage, even if it meant more sacrifices ahead. The following week brought fresh challenges. A local tech blog published a piece framing the kiss as bold but reckless, and suddenly partnership inquiries dried up. Nolan's best friend from college, Sarah, who had moved to New York for her own career, called to offer support, but warned him about the broader societal pressures gay men still faced in business. "You've always been the strong one, Nolan, but don't underestimate how deep these biases run," she said. Meanwhile, at home, Theo shared stories from his classroom, where he taught students about historical figures who hid their identities, drawing parallels that made Nolan reflect on his own path. The internal conflict intensified when Nolan learned from Alex that a rival startup was circling their talent, sensing weakness. He stayed late one night, pacing the empty office and questioning every decision that led to this moment. Had the shock of the announcement been worth it, or was he sacrificing the future he had fought so hard to create? Theo texted him a simple message: "Come home. We need each other." That small gesture reminded Nolan of the romantic bond that had always anchored him, the quiet happiness they shared in everyday moments like cooking together or watching the bay at dusk. As the days blurred into a tense routine of calls and strategy sessions, Nolan began to see the cracks in his old way of living. The crisis forced conversations with Theo that revealed deeper truths about their love, turning misunderstandings into opportunities for growth. Yet the pressure from family silence and investor doors closing weighed heavily, building toward a climax Nolan could feel approaching. He knew the road ahead would test every part of him, but for the first time, he felt ready to confront the choices that would define not just his company, but the man he was becoming. The emotional journey stretched before him, full of unexpected turns, but with Theo by his side, the path seemed a little less lonely. Weeks passed in a blur of damage control, and the startup's hallways, once buzzing with energy, now echoed with uncertainty as employees whispered about potential layoffs. Nolan threw himself into pitching to smaller investors, traveling to Los Angeles and Seattle in a desperate bid to keep Innovate AI alive, but each meeting ended with polite rejections that masked underlying discomfort with his public coming out. "We love the tech, Nolan, but the optics," one potential backer had said awkwardly, leaving the sentence unfinished yet crystal clear. Back in San Francisco, Theo noticed the exhaustion etching lines around Nolan's eyes and suggested a weekend away to clear their heads, but Nolan declined, citing urgent board reports. The strain in their relationship grew, rooted in old patterns where Nolan prioritized work over emotional needs, leading to their first real argument in months. "You came out for us, but now you're hiding in the office again," Theo had said one evening, his voice rising with hurt. "I feel like I'm losing you to this fight." Nolan's defensive reply only widened the gap, highlighting the misunderstandings that came from years of Nolan shielding Theo from business stresses. Meanwhile, family tensions escalated when Nolan's sister unexpectedly reached out via video call. Dad's not speaking to me either now, because I defended you, she confessed, her face tired from the crossfire. Mom cries every night, but she's starting to ask questions about Theo. Maybe there's hope. The conversation stirred a mix of hope and pain in Nolan, forcing him to confront how his identity crisis had rippled outward, affecting not just his marriage, but the family bonds he had once taken for granted. At work, Alex became his rock, staying late to brainstorm new funding angles and reminding Nolan of their early days coding in a cramped apartment. Remember when we started this with nothing but belief? This is just another pivot, Alex said, but even he couldn't hide the worry lines on his forehead. The betrayal hit hardest when a longtime board member resigned quietly, citing personal differences in an email that felt like a quiet stab. Nolan spent hours alone replaying the pitch night, questioning if the shocking kiss had been impulsive or inevitable. One crisp afternoon, Nolan surprised Theo at the high school where he taught, waiting outside the classroom with 2 coffees in hand. The students streamed out, laughing and chatting, oblivious to the weight their teacher carried. Theo's face lit up when he saw Nolan, and for a moment, the romantic spark they had shared in happier times flickered back to life. They walked to a nearby cafe, talking openly about the sacrifices each had made. Theo giving up dreams of adopting kids sooner because of the secrecy, Nolan ignoring his own health from stress. "I don't regret coming out," Nolan admitted, "but I hate how it's hurting you." Theo reached across the table, his touch grounding. "It's not hurting me as much as the hiding did. We're growing through this, Nolan. Together." That conversation marked a turning point, easing some of the internal conflict and strengthening their bond amid the external chaos. Yet society continued to push back. A prominent industry event invited Nolan to speak, but then withdrew the offer after online backlash from conservative voices, labeling his story as pushing an agenda. The rejection stung, amplifying the prejudice he had feared all along. In response, Nolan poured his energy into mentoring younger gay employees at the company, sharing pieces of his journey to foster a more inclusive culture. Alex organized a small team gathering at a local bar, where stories flowed and support solidified, reminding Nolan that friendship could be a lifeline. But as payroll loomed closer, the financial pressure mounted, forcing tough decisions like freezing hires and cutting non-essential expenses. Nolan lay awake many nights, staring at the ceiling while Theo slept peacefully beside him, grappling with the pivotal choice ahead: sell part of the company at a loss or risk everything on a last-ditch crowdfunding campaign that could expose them further. The unexpected decision from Voss resurfaced in a surprising email a month later, not offering funding, but requesting a private meeting. Nolan agreed, curiosity mixed with dread, meeting the investor in a neutral downtown cafe. Voss, looking older under the fluorescent lights, admitted the pullout had been more about his own board's pressure than personal bias. "I have a son who's gay," he confessed quietly, the revelation hanging between them like a bridge. "Your courage made me reflect on my choices. I can't reinvest officially, but I can introduce you to allies who might." The conversation opened doors Nolan hadn't anticipated, yet also highlighted the hypocrisies in the business world. Driving home that evening, Nolan felt a shift in his perspective, the emotional awakening beginning to take root. He realized that his journey wasn't just about survival, but about transforming pain into purpose, even if it meant more sacrifices along the way. Theo greeted him at the door with a warm embrace, sensing the change without words. And for the first time in weeks, they talked late into the night about dreams beyond the startup, including building a life where their love didn't have to compete with ambition. The conflicts had tested them, but they were emerging stronger, ready for whatever the next chapter brought in this complex tapestry of love, family, and identity. The introduction from Voss proved to be a double-edged sword, opening conversations with 3 new potential investors who seemed genuinely interested in Innovate.ai's AI technology rather than Nolan's personal life. Yet each meeting carried an undercurrent of caution, with subtle questions about long-term stability that Nolan interpreted as coded concerns about his openness. He navigated them carefully, drawing on the growth he had experienced since the pitch night, but the constant vigilance drained him. At home, the improved communication with Theo brought moments of genuine happiness, like quiet dinners where they planned a future trip to the mountains, but old misunderstandings resurfaced during a heated discussion about family reconciliation. "Your dad might never accept us fully," Theo said one evening, frustration evident. "But pushing for a visit now could break you more." Nolan's insistence on trying anyway led to a rare silence between them, the kind that echoed louder than arguments and forced both to examine their fears of loss. Work intensified as the crowdfunding campaign launched, with Nolan pouring late nights into video updates that shared not just the company's vision, but snippets of his emotional journey as a gay entrepreneur. The response was overwhelmingly positive from the LGBTQ community and allies, raising unexpected small donations that kept the lights on, but conservative media outlets twisted the narrative, accusing him of exploiting his identity for funds. The betrayal from public opinion stung, mirroring the internal doubts that still lingered. Alex stood by him through it all, becoming more than a co-founder, but a true confidant, sharing his own stories of past relationships that had faltered under similar pressures. "You're not alone in this gay story, man," Alex said during one brainstorming session, offering perspective that helped Nolan see his struggles as part of a larger pattern among men loving men in competitive fields. A pivotal moment arrived when Nolan's mother called unexpectedly, her voice tentative over the line. "Your father won't admit it, but he's been reading articles about you. He asked me to tell you he's proud of the company, even if the rest is hard for him." The partial acceptance cracked open a door Nolan had thought sealed, sparking a wave of mixed emotions that ranged from relief to lingering resentment. He shared the news with Theo over a walk in the park, the same spot where they had reconnected weeks earlier, and the conversation turned romantic and hopeful, reaffirming their commitment through tender words and shared laughter. Yet the crisis peaked when one of the new investors pulled out at the last minute after a background check revealed old family ties to conservative groups, citing reputational risk. The loss felt like a personal attack, pushing Nolan to the brink of exhaustion and forcing him to consider selling equity to a larger firm that demanded more control. Theo sensed the breaking point and insisted on a day off, driving them to a secluded beach north of the city where waves crashed against rocky shores. There, under the open sky, they confronted the sacrifices head-on, Nolan admitting how his drive to prove himself as a gay man in business had sometimes overshadowed their marriage, and Theo revealing his own quiet fears of being seen only as the supportive husband. The honest exchange cleared the air, transforming misunderstanding into deeper understanding and strengthening their bond in ways the early days of secrecy never allowed. Back at the office the next day, Nolan made a decisive choice, rejecting the controlling offer and instead rallying the team for an internal pivot toward open-source AI tools that aligned with his values of authenticity. The decision risked short-term stability but promised long-term integrity, marking a turning point in his personal growth. As months turned and the company stabilized through community support and smaller deals, Nolan reflected on the journey's lessons during a quiet evening with Theo. The romantic happiness they had reclaimed felt earned, no longer shadowed by hidden truths. Family conversations remained cautious but ongoing, and friendships like Alex's provided steady anchors. The societal pressures hadn't vanished, but Nolan's internal awakening allowed him to face them with resilience rather than fear. He began mentoring at local LGBTQ centers, sharing his story to help others avoid the isolation he once endured. The unexpected decision from Voss, once a source of pain, now symbolized the complex web of human connections that could both wound and heal. Through it all, Nolan realized that true success wasn't measured in funding rounds, but in the courage to live openly in the love that sustained him. The conflicts had forged him into a man more attuned to his emotions, ready to balance ambition with the relationships that mattered most. Yet, as new opportunities emerged, he wondered how far this growth would take them, the future stretching ahead with both promise and uncertainty. With the company gaining traction through its pivot, Nolan found himself fielding media requests from progressive outlets eager to feature his story as an example of resilience in the tech world. He accepted a few carefully, using the platform to highlight not just business success, but the emotional challenges gay men faced in balancing identity and ambition. Theo attended one interview as moral support, their public hand holding a quiet statement that drew positive comments online and reinforced the romantic foundation they had rebuilt. However, the high from these wins was short-lived when an anonymous leak from within the industry exposed internal financial struggles, sparking rumors that threatened the fragile investor confidence they had regained. Nolan suspected a former board member, but lacked proof, the sense of betrayal cutting deep and reigniting old insecurities about trust in professional circles. He confided in Alex over beers after work, the conversation revealing layers of friendship that had deepened through the crisis. "You've changed for the better, Nolan," Alex observed. "But don't let the past betrayals make you cynical." The advice resonated, prompting Nolan to confront the leaker indirectly through a company-wide meeting that emphasized unity and transparency. The move diffused the immediate threat, but required Nolan to sacrifice personal pride by addressing the team's concerns openly, including his own vulnerabilities. At home, Theo provided steady encouragement, their evenings filled with planning for a potential expansion that included family-friendly policies for employees, a direct reflection of their shared values. Yet another family hurdle emerged when Nolan's father sent a brief email acknowledging the company's progress without mentioning Theo, a half-step forward that stirred complicated feelings of hope and unresolved pain. The climax built as a major tech conference approached, where Nolan was invited to keynote after all, the organizers citing his authentic leadership. Preparing the speech forced him to revisit every step of his journey, from the shocking kiss to the unexpected alliances formed in the aftermath. Theo helped rehearse, their practice sessions turning into intimate discussions about future dreams, including starting a family through adoption once stability returned. The night before the event, however, Nolan received a call from Voss offering subtle advice. "Stay true, but protect what's yours." The words carried weight, reminding Nolan of the complex motivations behind the investor's initial decision. On stage the next day, under bright lights with hundreds watching, Nolan delivered a powerful talk that wove business insights with personal growth, receiving a standing ovation that felt like validation after months of doubt. Backstage, Theo waited with open arms, their embrace a private celebration amid the public triumph. But the true test came the following weeks when a conservative shareholder group attempted a takeover bid, citing Nolan's lifestyle as a risk factor. The battle consumed days of legal meetings and strategy sessions, pushing Nolan to the edge of burnout and straining his relationship once more as he withdrew emotionally. Theo confronted him gently one night, reminding him of the hyena they had faced before. "You've grown so much, Nolan. Don't let this undo that." The conversation led to a pivotal choice. Nolan decided to fight the bid publicly, rallying support from allies in the LGBTQ business community and turning the conflict into a broader conversation about inclusion. The sacrifice paid off when key employees and new investors backed him, defeating the attempt and solidifying his leadership. Through the ordeal, Nolan's internal awakening reached new depths, recognizing how prejudice and personal choices intertwined in shaping destinies for gay men. His friendship with Alex evolved into a partnership that included co-authoring an article on ethical entrepreneurship, further extending his influence. Family ties strengthened incrementally, with his mother visiting briefly and meeting Theo in a tentative but hopeful encounter. The romantic happiness between Nolan and Theodore blossomed anew, marked by small gestures like weekend getaways that reaffirmed their love. As the company entered a phase of steady growth, Nolan reflected on the journey's twists, from initial shock to hard-won stability, understanding that every misunderstanding and betrayal had contributed to his maturity. The emotional landscape had shifted, leaving him more compassionate and resolute, prepared for whatever lay ahead in a world that still demanded courage from those who loved differently. The takeover threat behind them, Innovate AI entered a new chapter of expansion, hiring diverse talent and launching products that reflected Nolan's commitment to authentic leadership. He and Theo celebrated with a small gathering of close friends and supportive colleagues at their apartment, laughter filling the space that had once echoed with tension. Alex raised a toast to resilience, his words capturing the collective growth they had all experienced. Yet Nolan knew the journey wasn't over. Societal pressures lingered in subtle ways, from cautious client interactions to occasional online criticism. He channeled that awareness into advocacy, joining panels on LGBTQ inclusion in tech and mentoring young gay entrepreneurs facing similar identity crises. Theo, inspired, incorporated discussions on equality into his history lessons, their shared purpose strengthening the bond that had endured every test. One quiet Sunday, as they hiked a trail overlooking the Pacific, Nolan turned to Theo with a question that had been forming for months. What if we adopt sooner than we planned? The company's stable now, and I don't want to wait anymore. Theo's smile was radiant, the romantic moment echoing their happiest days and symbolizing the fulfillment they had fought for. The decision marked another step in their evolution, blending personal dreams with the professional life they had rebuilt together. Family acceptance grew gradually, with Nolan's father sending a card on their anniversary, a small but meaningful gesture that healed old wounds without erasing the past. Nolan's internal conflicts had resolved into a quiet confidence. The man who once hid his husband now openly celebrating their love as a source of strength. Reflecting on the entire arc, from the shocking announcement that upended everything to the unexpected alliances and hard choices that followed, Nolan saw how each element had contributed to his awakening. The relationships with family, friends like Alex, and especially Theo had been the true anchors, teaching him that growth came not from perfection, but from facing consequences with honesty. The company thrived not despite his openness, but because of it, attracting partners who valued integrity over image. As they watched the sunset from the trail's end, hands intertwined, Nolan felt a profound sense of peace, the emotional journey having transformed challenges into wisdom. True or false? Coming out in a high-pressure business environment always leads to stronger personal relationships and professional success for gay men in America.